Hello and welcome to Adoption and Implementation of Zero Trust in Legacy Networks. Please welcome INSA President Suzanne Wilson-Heckenberg.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for today's program. We have a terrific lineup of speakers ready to discuss key strategies and lessons learned from implementing zero trust in legacy systems. From SolarWinds to the recent Pulse Secure hack, it is quite clear our current cybersecurity models are failing us. As DoD acting CIO John Sherman recently said, we are at one of these inflection points. Our current approaches are not going to take us into the future. As the panel will discuss today, zero trust security principles can better position cybersecurity professionals to secure enterprise networks and sensitive data. Before we begin today's program, let me make a couple of housekeeping notes. If you have questions, please submit them through the Q&A box on the right side of your screen. We will do our best to get to all of your questions. And if you wish, please include both your name and your organization. We are pleased to welcome members of the press today. Please remember today's program is on the record and we will be sharing it via our website on Monday. In addition, we will post this program through email as a follow-up. And finally, I would like to thank our sponsors, Applied Insights and Worldwide Technology, for their critical support of this program. We could not deliver this kind of expert insight without the support of our partners and sponsors. Now it is my pleasure to welcome Bob Costello, Strategic Advisor for the Public Sector at Worldwide Technology, who will introduce our panel moderator. Bob, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Suzanne. On behalf of Worldwide Technology, I would like to thank INSA for holding today's discussion. Worldwide Technology is deeply interested in learning how we can partner with the federal government on initiatives such as Zero Trust and TIC 3.0. Now it gives me great pleasure to introduce our moderator. John Doyon is INSA's Executive Vice President. In this capacity, he provides strategic oversight of all INSA councils, policy initiatives, and programming. Previously, he served as the Chief Data Officer and Director of the Office of Data Strategy and Innovation at the National Counterterrorism Center. A career National Security Agency officer, he held numerous leadership positions at NSA, as well as serving in assignments at the White House, CIA, the Pentagon, and overseas. Please join me in welcoming John Doyon.
Hey, thank you, Bob, for that introduction, and thank you to WWT as well for supporting this program today. And to everyone listening and joining us this afternoon, thank you. We're glad you're here, and we're really glad to have a great lineup of panelists today to talk about zero trust and how you adopt it and implement it in your legacy networks. And let me go ahead and introduce our four panelists and welcome them to the program. First, we have Gerald Caron, who is a member of the Senior Executive Service at the Department of State, where he has served as the Director of Enterprise Network Management since June of 2016. Currently, Jerry is on detail to the Department of Health and Human Services, where he serves as the acting CIO for the Office of the Inspector General. Also joining us by phone today, we have Mr. Shawn Connolly. Shawn is the Trusted Internet Connections TIC Program Manager and Senior Cybersecurity Architect at CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency within the Department of Homeland Security. In addition to leading the TIC initiative, Shawn authored the IT Modernization Report to the President in 2017, and in 2019, he co-authored Zero Trust Architectures. Also joining us, we have Dr. Cynthia Mendoza, who is the Chief Technology Officer at the Department of State's Bureau of Intelligence and Research. Previously, Cynthia served at the Office of the Director of National Intelligence as the acting Deputy CIO and the IC's Chief Architect, where she was responsible for advocating and leading the IC-CIO and its modernization efforts in ensuring the security and protection of the IC's IT systems. And our fourth panelist today joins us from NSA. He's Mr. Kevin Bingham. Kevin is the Zero Trust Technical Lead at NSA, where he supports NSA's Cybersecurity Directorate's efforts on critical networks and systems with the goal of better protecting and defending classified and critical IT infrastructure from adversaries, cyber criminals, and malicious insiders. So everyone, welcome. I'm looking forward to our discussion today. And to get the discussion started, I thought I would just start with an opening question for each of our panelists. And that is, if you could give us a little bit more about your background, including what you're doing currently, your current position and role, and more specifically, share with us some of your experience working with Zero Trust architectures. And let's go ahead and we'll start the conversation with Jerry. Jerry, you want to get us started today?
Sure. Thanks for having me, first of all. Pleasure to be here. So, yes, I am the Director of Enterprise Network here at the Department of State and the Bureau of Information Resource Management. However, tomorrow will be my last day with the Department of State, as I will permanently be the CIO at HHS OIG Monday. So my journey with Zero Trust, I started it a few years ago when it started, people started about it, and then vendors started talking about it and going to RSA conferences, and they all define it in different ways, you know, that meet their technology. So I developed an architecture a couple of years ago, put it on a plotter-sized piece of paper so that we can, so I could tell people in the hallway as well that was saying, oh, Zero Trust, you know, and using it as a buzzword. Well, if you're only talking about this little piece of it, this is Zero Trust as a whole. So I found that my biggest challenge has been still, I do a lot of briefings with some other agency people and everything, is still defining what Zero Trust really means and understanding it. 800-207 does a good job. There's some other documentations, and I'm sure Kevin will talk about what they published, which is a very good document as well, and it's been very helpful to people. But I still find there's that, all right, how does this apply to me in defining how to go about doing it? I currently am a co-chair on the CIO's Innovation Council on Zero Trust, along with Sylvia Burns from FDIC, the CIO for FDIC, and Alper, who is with the NCCOE, the National Cybersecurity Council of Excellence. I also am a co-chair for a nonprofit called ATARC, which we have a working group as well on Zero Trust. We actually did a TIC 3.0 working group, which was very successful, where we had about 7 or 8 proof of concepts. We're going to do the same thing with Zero Trust as well, and have vendors come in and do full proof of concepts of what they or niches that they do within Zero Trust. So I'm finding also that the hardest part is not the technology. Technology is a lot of what we've been talking about. You know, least privilege when it comes to identity management, protecting data, categorizing. It's the policy and the culture change, I think, that's been the challenge, and the playbook needed to get the buy-in and everybody that needs to participate, because it's a journey, it's not a project. It's going to take a village to do.
Well, thank you for that. And it sounds like you have a lot of really great hands-on experience, and I'm sure we'll be tapping into that as the hour unfolds. Let's go ahead and ask next Dr. Cynthia Mendoza. Cynthia, if you'd like to also tell us a little bit more about your background and your intersection with Zero Trust.
Absolutely. Howdy and good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I'm grateful to spend this time with you. A little bit about my background. I'm a native Texan from San Antonio. I attended Texas A&M University, and I received my undergraduate degree in electrical engineering. Later on, I was able to attend George Washington University, where I received my master's and PhD in systems engineering and engineering management. I spent 23 years working in industry. Some of the companies that I worked for were General Dynamics, Boeing, and E-Systems. At E-Systems is where I began my affiliation with the GeoInt community. I also was able to spend 10 years running a small business with my dad. It was a software and system engineering company, and that's where I learned the true value of cash flow. I've been blessed with opportunities throughout my government career. I began that in 2005. Some of the positions that I held was the NGA Chief Engineer, and also, as you mentioned, the IC Chief Architect, and currently CTO at INR State. One of my major guiding principles is working with people, building trusted partnerships to guide behaviors towards mission outcomes. So I truly believe people are the secret sauce. As mentioned earlier, the policy is key, but also getting the culture on board. Sometimes there's a lot of technology that's available, but getting people to all be on the same page, marching to the same sheet of music is a challenge. So my experience with Zero Trust was in my role as the IC Chief Architect. When John Sherman was the IC CIO, we moved more towards a federated environment, and our organization was responsible for the 3 foundational architectures: the data reference architecture to leverage data services, and then how do we attribute the data to ensure it's being seen by the right people; identity, credential, and access management, which is a major muscle movement of the Zero Trust environment. And that was a service of common concern. And so the key there is we as a service provider, and we were driving standardization and consistency across the enterprise on how we're credentialing individuals to access different environments and information. And then also we had the collaboration reference architecture. So how do we communicate across our community shared space? So the data, what data can be seen by whom, what credentialing each individual has, and then communication across the community shared space. So this is definitely critical and working in harmony so that we can improve our safeguarding posture. And it's all towards building a trustworthiness in our ecosystem.
Great, thank you. And let's go next to Shawn. Shawn Connolly, would you also like to share with us a little bit about your background and where you touch on the Zero Trust part?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, John. Again, my name is Shawn Connolly, CISA. I'm the program manager. TIC is the federal government's primary architectural strategy and how to enhance network security across the federal enterprise. The federal enterprise in 100 or so federal civilian executive agencies. For the last 10 years, the government's primary protection strategy was towards the legacy castle and moat philosophy. In September of 2019, OMB released Memo 1926, update to the TIC initiative. More recently, in July of 2020, CISA, in collaboration with a number of stakeholders and partners, released our core TIC3 documentation. And in April, the TIC program picked up all the first TIC use cases. In this updated guidance, there are 3 themes. It offers a new security strategy, allowing agencies to explore new opportunities for redefinition of their perimeter, flexible architecture, allowing agencies to have a variety of architectures, some more toward the traditional access point, for the last 10 years, more toward leading edge, including Zero Trust, but allows for alternative architectures for the agency to find their boundaries. And third theme is visibility, that situational awareness, both for the agency and for CISA. So understand that shift from where we were with TIC 1 and TIC 2, from securing a single network boundary to where we are at TIC 3, allowing for distributed secure architecture with new strategies, new flexibility, new visibility, is the most change in the updated guidance. And so, of course, part of that is Zero Trust. We've been working with a number of agencies, including Jerry's team over at State, on pilots that support or build out the Zero Trust philosophy. We plan to continue the momentum with agencies. We have a number of use cases in the pipeline to release. Ideally, we'd also like to release a Zero Trust use case. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, we'll get back to some of these issues, I'm sure, as we and looking at use cases and such as we continue the discussion. And Kevin, let me turn to you as well and ask you the same question about your background and where you intersect with the Zero Trust issues.
Thanks, John. So I'm a 20-year veteran in the cyber defense field. After spending 10 years as a navigator in the Air Force in a career field that was going away, I decided I'd switch over to something that would be a little bit more of a growth area, and it turned out to be so. My first job, and I spent about 7 years doing it, was at our red team, and that really opened my eyes to the realities of networks and the vulnerabilities of those networks, and the lack of awareness in many cases as to what needed to be done in order to try to secure them. And it didn't necessarily need to be that complicated. And so my support of the assumed breach concept, which I've certainly been preaching probably along with a lot of our other panelist members for many years, was core to that. From my red team time, I went down to work in the office of the DoD CIO as the computer network defense architect working on policy and strategy down there. Again, trying to advance, our concept of what we needed to do for security. Actually, remember back when the Forrester paper was written for the first time, I was still down there. And I turned to one of my colleagues and I said, this is what we're all going to be doing. The question is, how long is it going to take us to get there, right? And so, been sticking with the mitigation path, since then. And when the opportunity to start working a zero trust effort came up a couple of years ago, the DoD was looking at continuing to harden their networks, and so got involved in a joint team with DoD CIO, US Cybercom, DISA, and then of course us at NSA to start trying to prototype and advance the zero trust concepts within the DoD's network. Our team now continues to focus on innovating in that space, guiding. Jerry mentioned one of the products that we've published, and we hope to publish more. Working with Cybercom and DISA on generating reference architectures that'll help people understand zero trust and progress to zero trust, perhaps in a more controlled way, empower them to do more. And so within the critical networks and systems customer space, which DoD is part of it, we also are also very focused on the national security system aspects of it too. And know that there's a lot more work that we need to be doing here in the future. Thanks.
Great. First, let me remind everyone in the audience listening, please send in your questions. We'll take them while the show goes on, and hopefully we'll have a chance to get to as many as possible. And I just noticed that one of the questions that came in is the first question I was preparing to ask. And so the question was from Terry Roberts at Whitehawk, and it's basically was, where can an organization start? And that's my starting question I wanted to ask the panel was, how do organizations get started with zero trust when you have existing infrastructure? We never get the luxury of starting from a blank page. So where do you get started, especially when you have a complex legacy environment to deal with? And what are the use cases that you might want to focus on? And what are the steps that you think you need to take? So with that, let me perhaps just continue with you, Kevin, for now, and then we'll go back around if others have additional comments to add in, and we'll get started with you.
Yeah, so thanks, John. We do have a view of that. We've got a number of different customers and partners that we've worked with as we've been trying to prototype some zero trust environments. And normally when we do go in and begin conversations with an organization on how do you get started, of course, every organization's at a different level of cybersecurity maturity, if you will. Some can be much better than others. We start with truly trying to help them understand the problem. Jerry already mentioned the cultural challenges of zero trust, and they're strong. We like to say that the pull of legacy is very strong. It's really hard to break people out of that old way of thinking, doing better the things that you did 2 or 3 years ago versus trying to do something else. So when we look at that, first let's understand what zero trust is. We spend a little time there and making sure that they understand from those cultural challenge perspectives that they need to have that top executive level leadership support all the way down to that operator and implementer, right? If the operator and implementer, and we've seen situations where you have an operator or an implementer that's not necessarily on board, it takes a lot longer. It's much more of a challenge. But once we get everyone on board and they understand this truly is assumed breach, right? So let's start with almost looking at this as if it's an open coffee shop Wi-Fi network, right? We would never do that, but that gets your head in the right space of what you're really trying to do with the assumed breach model. Then we start looking at the actual traditional zero trust steps, right? And there's some folks have 5 steps, some 4. The processes change depending on where you're getting your information from. But for us, it's generally, let's sit down, let's understand what your mission needs are, your critical mission items, the data, the assets, applications, the services that you need to perform your mission. And once they understand that, We'll start running them through the rest of the process to monitor their environment, to start understanding how they want to set up the basics of a zero trust architecture, how they want to monitor and do analytics on that. We have a number of different architectural products that we've put together and have been working on for within the DoD and DISA and others that I think become very useful in those states, especially with the different levels of maturity that these organizations are at. We can look at how much pre-zero trust do you need to do? Are you in pretty good shape when you're dealing with your users and understanding what your devices and your software applications are, and then moving to those next levels of maturity through a journey, again, already stated, but it's important for folks to understand that while when you look at the beginning of the plan of zero trust, it can be sometimes overwhelming because you're like, wow, look at all those things that potentially get mapped out on the roadmap for the next few years. It is an iterative process, and we can start from basics and then move to intermediate, and then continue to progress, usually on their own, right? We at some point, the training wheels come off, they understand it and are rolling on their own and start moving forward with it. But yeah, so that's sort of our initial approach that we've taken up to this point. Of course, we're learning every time we have an engagement with a new partner or customer.
Great. Hey, Jerry, let me bring you into this question as well, because it sounded like you had lots of experience with a couple different instances of implementing zero trust and getting started. How do you look at this? The question of how do you get started with a legacy network?
Yeah, I get asked this question just about every presentation that I do when I present my architecture, and a lot of people are struggling with this. One of the things, first of all, is that playbook. Like you equate it to like a football, playbook. All right, who do I need on the field? Who are my trainers? Who's my support staff? All right, who's going to be my coach? All right, who's in my executive? Who do I need, to be part of the team in that playbook? The next thing I would do that I recommend is you've already made investments and you want to make the most of those investments. So inventory what those are, understand, all right, do I have any projects? Like maybe I have an identity management program already, or you have an identity management project. All right, let's adopt that into the zero trust methodology. We may have to tweak it so it fits part of the bigger, larger puzzle. Or you have tools that could contribute. Could they contribute to zero trust? Make the most of those investments. And then once you understand that, of course, I have an architecture that I already drew out. So, once I have a bunch of boxes that have their concepts around what to do, I plug those in, and then I know what my gaps are. And then, these are the gaps that I have to fill and understand, I need to get tools or I need to jump off projects with them or whatever the disposition is of that gap. The other thing that I think people really need to understand, and a lot of people go, I'm an inside out kind of person when I talk about zero trust, whereas a lot of people are outside in. And the difference is I kind of focus primarily on the data first, because that, and at the end of the day, is what we're trying to protect. So is our data categorized correctly? We had a big effort here at state to categorize data because we found system owners are looking at FIPS 199-2 and it's just too many categories. So we pare down so what they know are the categories applicable to state, and they got better categorization of their data. Where's your data traveling, and baselining that so you can at least know as best as you can, which is hard, what normal is. Then I work back. All right, what is the facilitation to that data? Is the application. And okay, how do we harden the application? There's a lot of talk about devices. Well, we all know devices are different, right? I can put a lot of security agents on a desktop that I can't put on a mobile phone. Some of us are doing BYOD. I'm not fully managing devices. I'm doing application management. So I'm pushing policies to applications, which is actually doing the facilitation to the data. And then I move back to identity. All right, who needs the data to the right people at the right time, and understand the different categories. That's kind of the overall approach that I take. And then what policies need to change. We're very much a peanut butter spread approach government. whereas we try to protect everything equally. But I think with this, we're trying to put our focus on what's important. I like kind of equate it to the crown jewels versus the bologna sandwich. I want to put my effort towards the crown jewels. If I lose my bologna sandwich, I'll go to the refrigerator and make another one. But is my crown jewels protected at the end of the day? Can I answer that question? That's what I want to be able to answer. So that's a high level overview of how I answer that question when it comes up.
Okay, thanks. Hey, that, you started talking about, some of the different aspects of, securing, broadly network security, and then there's protection of data and then looking at the data layer. And so I thought I'd go to this next question with Cynthia, given some of your background, data reference architectures and such. While much of Zero Trust focuses on network security, what are your thoughts, Cynthia, around what is needed for protecting content and documents and other types of data at the data layer?
So absolutely, that's very important. I like to look at this, approaching it from a system engineering standpoint, understanding what is your as-is architecture today, what's on your baseline, and that's where you would understand what are all the data holdings, where is your data in files, unstructured data, where is the data in different cloud applications. Once you understand exactly where your data is, and then the next thing, you need to have a clear understanding of what business you're in. I know that sounds really foundational, but what are the, as Jerry said, your crown jewels? What are the things that you really need to protect? And where is that data so that you ensure that you follow that least privilege, where people only have access to the data that they need to have access to in order to accomplish their job? So I believe it's very important that you understand how to accomplish that, make sure that the data has the right attributes, and that you're credentialing, you have an authoritative source to credential the individuals so that your data is not at risk and you're able to improve that safeguarding posture. So 1 through N list is key, so you understand how to prioritize those, because there's so many different data holdings, so you need to make sure that you're putting your money against the most important, the most bang for your buck, if you will, on what data returns more value to what your organization is doing in order to accomplish mission success.
Okay, great. And Shawn, I wanted to bring you back in as well, and actually kind of loop back to another aspect of this, which is, we're talking a lot about Zero Trust, but as you mentioned, you started with trusted internet connection with TIC and such. So how do you see frameworks such as TIC, I guess we're up to TIC 3.0 now, or other things such as continuous diagnostics and mitigation? How do you see those types of things as helping to advance Zero Trust?
Sure, yeah, I'll start with TIC and then scope. TIC 3 is designed to fit with other federal initiatives such as CDM, like TIC divide agency architectures by trust zones, going back to what Jerry were talking about, defining what you're trying to protect, not trying to defend against, but what you're just trying to protect. Shifting the emphasis from a strictly physical network perimeter to a boundary trust zone within an agency environment, with a goal of ensuring basic security protectors across dispersed network environments. So I think, you mentioned NIST 800-207, and to be fair, Zero Trust Architecture, I'm just one of the 4 authors of that document. Stu, Scott,
Malcolm. Well, then it was a great document, right? If you were an author, it was a great document.
Co-author, but they're the rock stars of that. I'm more the Ringo Starr of the group of that document. But thank you for the compliment. But there's seven Zero Trust tenets in that document, and we list them as Zero Trust. But to be fair, they can be used for a lot of different frameworks. All data and services are resources. All data is secure. Access is per session. Access is determined by policy. Everything's monitored. So again, I think we can use these common tenets across different frameworks, from TIC to CDM. I think you're seeing some of this, what's being used by the NCPS team, what's commonly known as Einstein and Claw pilots, but there's a number of initiatives across the federal government where they're embracing these common principles that are a key to Zero Trust.
Great. Well, let's move on from there and look at another question. Back, so we talked about the data layer, and I want to talk a little bit more about applications. So let's go, I guess, we'll go back to Gerald with this one. Gerald, have you considered the implication or how zero trust would work on applications? And what do you see as some of the challenges there?
So yes, definitely, because you know, a lot of people talk about devices, but we're getting in this world where we are doing BYOD and we can't, you know, manage every device equally. You know, we're managing desktops one way, where we're managing mobile phones another way, laptops another way. So I'm a big advocate for unified endpoint management as much as possible to try to consolidate that in some form or fashion. But we know today I can put many security agents on a desktop that I can't put on a mobile phone. Or when I'm doing BYOD, I'm doing application management. And I can only see like maybe the model of the phone, and I can only manage the application. I can't manage the phone itself. So that's where I go and say, you know, the actual facilitation to data is between the user and the data is not necessarily the device. Although I'm not saying don't do protections of the device and um, you know, interrogate the device. However, it's the applications that are doing that facility, whether it be a browser-based application or a homegrown application or some kind of COTS application. So really understanding the technology, you really have to work with like some of the system owners because, you know, it's not the network people that own the system, it's usually the system owners. So you got to get their buy-in, got to get them working, understanding what a zero trust is. That's actually what I started doing here at State, is found a system owner that had high value asset data, which was doing modernization, presented him the architecture, and I said, let's work from your data back. Like I said, I'm an inside out kind of person. Let's work with the categorization of your data, understand where your data goes, understand where your data is. All right, how is your application, you know, now that you modernize it, how can we put protections? What is within the realm of control? And protect that application so it's hardened to protect, you know, in the policies that support zero trust. And then say, all right, what types of devices are people using? All right, let's understand that. And then what types of users? So that's kind of the approach that I've taken. But you really got to work with it. It takes a village to do zero trust in an organization, especially as big as State, with all the different components, and IT's kind of decentralized and dispersed because of the multiple missions that each bureau has here. So working, getting an understanding, getting the buy-in, and getting those system owners to understand, you know, what it is for them. The other thing I caution is we have the user population, and we know if we make this too difficult or we make it too stringent, we know users are very good at figuring out how to get their mission done. So we got to kind of make this foolproof, and we got to not only lock it down so tight, but we got to make it user friendly at least, so that users don't feel burdened and they find workarounds. So that's something else to work with the system owners with, is to make sure that it's user friendly as possible and intuitive.
Great. Hey, that brings actually is a good segue to my next question. And maybe we'll go back to Ringo Starr. I mean, Shawn for this one. And Shawn, how has, you know, you've got to get people on board whenever you do something, you know, you've got the big project, you want to, you know, bring zero trust implementation into your network. How has it been taken by, you know, your you know, the people that you work with that need to do this, your cybersecurity and infrastructure teams? Was it easy to get people on board? Did they see the value? Was it easy to implement? Was it, you know, how did it go as far as being able to actually do the implementation and bringing the team around to adopting zero trust?
Sure. I think one that's interesting, you know, we've done a number of tick pilots, and again, partner with OMB, sometimes the USDS team, various parts of GSA from FedRAMP or the EIS team. But we have an agent during a pilot, typically more through the CIO or the CIO shops like you're suggesting. But once we start getting into details and start, like Jared was talking, detangling the transaction flows and recognizes more than just, you know, a technical issue, see how the agency starts to bring in more stakeholders from their different teams. You know, sometimes there could be the teams, sometimes there could be teams that are more on the information assurance teams, but the interest and the recognition, the importance that grows across the org. I think one thing we've seen from a different perspective, we've had large pilots, maybe not just focused on zero trust, but we've had some other pilots which are more focused. I think we've had better success in take or use or just of zero trust being embraced when they start small or try to do an enterprise level change. Again, this is all to just listening to podcasts and on the commercial side as well. I think one of the keys is, again, start small, start back where we talked about before, defining what you're trying to protect versus what you're trying against.
Okay, thanks. And let me take this next one to Kevin. So Kevin, thinking about implementation. So what have you seen, and what have been some of the unexpected, or perhaps expected, but some of the positive or negative effects of zero trust on your organization as you've been working with here the last couple of years?
Yeah, no, so I think that I'll start with the positives here. What surprised me, I always looked at zero trust as being an obvious choice for how we should do security, right? The framework of zero trust and what we put within the pillars of zero trust is an assumed breach framework. We may call it something different at some point in the future, but it was an easy, large vision or strategy for us to explain why we would want to do things at the user or the device level or the network level or the data or visibility analytics side, if you relate that to pillars. But I was surprised in a positive way at how quickly organizations took that on board, right? Especially at an enterprise level. So when you're dealing with a very large organization or something like the government, it's empowering when you all are seeing things from a common strategy, and you understand we may not exactly agree with everything there, but that's definitely good enough that we can all agree to start moving forward. And so from that quickly, we would see renewed energy within the whole of how you might manage a portfolio, so that you only got so much money. So you're going to have to understand that I can't put all the money in places that I've put it in the past. I get confidence from the zero trust framework to get discipline and to understand why I'm spending money in a different area, with whether it be analytics or users or devices, or that hard, challenging area of data. I'm doing data tagging for these reasons, and I have a vision of what the end state should be. As hard as it is, we need to go ahead and take that crawl, that walk, that run towards where we're trying to get to with that. The team coming around, getting some renewed energy. The negatives, I would primarily say, can be just some organizations or individuals perhaps getting overwhelmed, again, based on the maturity of their organization. There are some that may just look at zero trust as another buzzword or buzz phrase for doing a lot of the same stuff that we would have tried to do before. Those negatives, I don't think, have to last very long, because normally within a conversation and a coming to a common understanding of what we're really talking about with zero trust, there's not a lot for us to fight about. It's a framework, and the capabilities that make up that framework can be powerful. Of course, we can make mistakes in that process too. But so from a negatives perspective, I just think it really comes down to some of the cultural challenges that you get, or some of the buy-in that you're trying to get from folks within the team that you really need on board.
Okay. Hey, I've been getting a lot of audience questions coming in, and so I should probably start to turn and get to some of these. And the first one I'd like to talk about, there's been a couple coming in about remote work, which has been a major issue, especially this pandemic year plus that we've had now. And maybe Cynthia, I'll ask you, given you're at the State Department now, and I know INR has been doing a lot of remote work, and also there's a huge issue with the IC at large. Do you see zero trust as an enabler that helps to strengthen the remote work or development efforts that are ongoing?
Absolutely. I've seen that in the work that I have done. For example, the remote access and the multi-factor authentication is key. And so that has worked really well in protecting services on the edge because we have to keep track of the applications and make sure that we're safeguarding those. That is definitely an area where we're applying safeguarding capabilities so that we can add those to the enterprise. So definitely a plus.
Great, thanks. And related to that, Gracie Kern asked the following question. Many people use VPNs to work from home, even though some security experts say zero trust network access platforms with identity-based protection are far more secure. So the question is, what are the obstacles to perhaps phasing out VPNs and implementing these more secure tools? And why don't I go to, well, let's go to Kevin at NSA with that one.
So yeah, I'll take a first stab at that. I won't be able to go into too much depth. We do have conversations a lot with folks as to what that really means from the phasing out of VPNs, and there are certainly plenty of people that are big fans of them. And when it comes to the costs and the complexities and the potential extension of the perimeter being expanded out by VPNs, we can all get agreement that we definitely would love to have something that's less complex, that gives you the security that you need, that doesn't extend your perimeter and then expose that soft inside of your network to adversaries that may be trying to get in. So there's a cultural challenge there. From a technical standpoint, I think it's primarily just us trying to make sure that we get everything properly configured and start getting some confidence into our customers as they start trying to transition over. But that is an old technology that people, a lot of people are big fans of, and so we're involved in a lot of conversations within our community to make sure people understand why we would be trying to move away from zero trust, or I'm sorry, from VPNs, but then also, can we truly get the same or better effective security out of other mechanisms for encrypted comms and identity between devices, users, and data?
Yeah, well, that's kind of, a basic question related to the topic of our panel today. So many legacy networks use VPNs. And so when you want to do something new like zero trust, how do you make that shift over? And so I guess, a good question, another one that's come in here is basically, where have you seen zero trust implemented successfully? And Gerald's laughing, so I'm going to go to Jerry and ask Jerry.
Oh, no.
Where have you seen it implemented successfully?
I haven't seen a full zero trust implemented successfully yet. And when I say full, from end to end, I haven't seen it yet. I think there's a lot of good things that people are doing and a lot of pieces, but the full path, I haven't seen that yet. But I see some really good things. I just got from one of the DoD components, I won't name it specifically, but they've taken the concepts and they're actually making them actionable. Where they're identified a set of tools and what concepts that they're fitting and moving forward and how they're going to move forward towards that. So I see some people are starting to really get it as an organization, understand the architecture that they need to put together, and really targeting, okay, here's some of the tools that we can use and against some of these concepts. So I'm starting to see some things that are really actionable. Now, like I said before, it's a journey. You're not gonna boil the ocean in a day. So it's like, where do you prioritize? Is very important. What's some of that low-hanging fruit maybe, and what's really some of the gaps and the real pain points that you want to address. So that I'm starting to see where people are starting to move smartly towards zero trust. I've seen briefing some other agencies like cyber councils. They got working groups across all their components for their organization around zero trust, which is a great thing to do. So, you know, they're all getting on the same page and all sharing their ideas and concepts. So I really see that people are moving in the right direction, and they're starting to get it, and they're starting to understand. They're starting to and move out on it, and get that roadmap and that game plan put together. So that I've been very impressed with some of the most recent discussions I've had with folks.
Okay. Hey, Shawn, I thought I'd reach out to you and get a view from CISA as far as, you know, where you have seen any zero trust, I guess, beginning to be implemented successfully. As Jerry was saying, he hasn't seen it full end to end yet, but where have you seen some successful efforts?
Yeah, I think one thing to remember, you know, Google itself, not the cloud provider, but the Google account, they're one of the first proponents of zero trust, if you will. And it took Google, one of the premier software companies in the world, 7 years to move what they consider to be a zero trust architecture. And couple that, the federal civilian executive, we have some of our missions that are older than Google is a company. And so I think it's going to, like Jerry was saying, it's going to take a long time. It's going to be a continual path for the federal government to move to where we can comfortably say we're in zero trust architecture enterprise. But to your point, you know, where we see agencies starting to embrace zero trust or start to see the benefit from zero trust is when they start to have that hackers handle inventory, they say, on the users, the devices, the applications, just to get this soapbox. The CDM program, the old phase one of the inventory, gain an inventory. CDM can help the agencies gain the accurate inventory. And then the second benefit is the ability to adapt to the new environments. I think what we saw over the last year with the telework surge last spring, you know, there was incredible movement across the agency to be adapt very quickly. At the same time, from CISA, was to migrate their services from their traditional service or server, their service to monitor environments in the Einstein program to the new Claw pilot. We're receiving telemetry from agencies or from their cloud environments in ways. So I think the ability to adapt is key. Then it moves into the advanced monitoring and an alert that's key to zero trust, both for the agency and their situational awareness means, and also CISA for our situational awareness requirements across. And ultimately, I think we're seeing where agencies are starting to streamline their security policy. Going back a little bit to what Kevin was talking about and Jerry's talking about, we're trying to get to where we're environment agnostic, on-prem, off-prem, cloud, at home, having these universal policies created, then implemented end-to-end organization. So ultimately, it's almost like we have a yin yang. The yin being you want to decrease friction for the which is the end user admin server itself, but the yang is increase friction for the adversary. Lateral movement, identify the living off tactics, and finding that signal.
Okay. Well, thank you. Let me take this next
John,
question.
John, do you mind if I add something?
Oh, please go right ahead.
I just wanted to add something. So one of the things is when people talk about zero trust, they talk about it from the technology aspect, and I think a lot of the things that people overlook is the tools aren't just going to come in and just automatically you get zero trust once you plug in these bunch of tools. An organization has to understand what their risk tolerance is as well. You really got to have that risk tolerance and it's got to be kind of dynamic. So, I'm going to trust a on-prem person coming from a known managed network, coming from a desktop that's fully managed with all the great security agents, using a PIV card more than a contractor, even though they may be cleared, using a personal device, using username and password. There's different risk tolerances we all have for these things. So really understanding risk tolerances and all the factors that create that risk, that it's a conglomeration of all kinds of different things that you're going to bring together to understand, all right, now what is my risk tolerance with this scenario? So I think that's really important. And I think, organizations got to understand that to be successful with this. It's not just bring in the technology, plug it in, and go. You're good to go, kind of thing. So.
Hey, thanks for adding in that comment, Jerry. Let me go back to Cynthia with another question. We've got a few more, about 10 more minutes to go, and I got tons of questions here, so I'm going to try to get through a few more. This one comes from Carol Woody, and she works up at the Software Engineering Institute at Carnegie Mellon. And she asks, what kind of situations have you found where zero trust is not appropriate? So, where you think, it might not be needed, or there's something better.
So I believe it honestly depends on what aspects of zero trust are we talking about. Zero trust is very complex, and there are several capabilities that are out there that support the full life cycle. So really understanding your as is state and where you're going is critical, because that way we've talked about prioritization, and you can create your 1 through N list so that you know what things are most important that you need to hit, so that you can create that environment where you're improving your safeguarding posture. So that may or may not be zero trust. I mean, it really depends on what you're working to accomplish. It'll help you better understand what your network is, what are on your endpoints, and who has access. So how you control that would drive, the decisions that you need to make. So I really believe that it depends on the results and outcomes and what your mission actually is. And then getting everybody on board. One of the things I've noticed, and I know folks said this earlier, is that, it takes a village. And I believe people are the secret sauce to this, but we need to have a common taxonomy where we're all on the same page. At State Department, we're on our early stages, and we're looking at our baseline and where we need to go. And we're meeting with several vendors, and I'm truly grateful for the time that they've spent with us, because they've really matured the zero trust, and you can make sure that these fit your organization. So it's not a fit for purpose, it's a fit for purpose. It's not a one size fits all, right? So it's fit for purpose, and we need to understand what those are. But that common taxonomy is going to be critical, so that we understand what we're talking about, and that we're all marching to the same sheet of music. So just to say that zero trust does or does not meet my needs, I don't believe that we can accurately say that. It depends on what the results and outcome, and what are the specific things that we're doing to improve the safeguarding of our different resources, understanding our users and endpoints, and doing your normal network hygiene that you do to keep your environment safe.
Great, thanks. Hey, we're getting, unsurprisingly, we're getting a couple of questions in from the audience related to SolarWinds. And so Callie McNaughton has a question, Harry Bonney has written in with a question, and the theme seems to be, if you had a network with a zero trust architecture, that was fully implemented, would it have helped protect from a hack similar to the hack that was used in the SolarWinds hack? And Kevin, let's go to you with that one.
Well, thanks, John. So we actually put a scenario like this in our cybersecurity information sheet that we published back at the end of February, and we've had many conversations within our technical groups at NSA about this. And once we have that conversation, and obviously, if an organization were impacted by something like SolarWinds, which is a very tough attack to truly deal with, right? Especially if you've got a perimeter environment. Obviously, the first advice that we give people is, whatever the mitigations or directions that you're getting from your federal cyber center or CISA or your cybersecurity service provider, maybe from us, is the first thing that you're going to do. But because zero trust is an assumed breach model, you immediately find yourself in a better position. Now, if it's properly implemented and mature, then I think you really can start seeing some benefits from it. And actually, I've got a copy of our CSI. I mean, we mentioned that whereas in a traditional network you would have probably complete trust, and certainly from the red teams I've done, I've seen what a trusted security appliance can do if it's got an adversary with privilege on it, right? It can be very destructive to a network or to the compromise of information on that network. As your trust environment, you're bringing that application or that software in, if it happens to be a supply chain software hit, signed or not, but is being brought in for a specific function. And we have the opportunity to work segmentation rules around that, and we have the ability to limit privilege and to not use a shared privileged or root account that's able to touch all systems and devices on the network. We know how it's supposed to be behaving, and so we can set up those analytics or those sensors that we need to make sure that we're watching it. And if we're letting that software or that appliance reach back for patches and it brings that malicious patch back, we probably don't have to let it go everywhere else on the internet too. So that deny by default policy could be powerful, right? For stopping communication with command and control servers or some type of exfil channel that might get used later. So yeah, we're optimistic that it would definitely provide benefit to folks that have properly implemented it. So I don't know if anyone else has thoughts on that.
Anybody else? Shawn or Jerry, Cynthia? Okay, then I'll have, we have time for, I think, one last question, and then I'll just ask if anyone has any final thoughts or comments. So the last question is from one of our government colleagues here at DISA, Deborah Dumont. And she writes, and this kind of gets a little bit to Cynthia's point about it's the people, bringing the people into it. And she says, what would you consider to be the most important planning to implement zero trust solution? Who should be at the table? And so Cynthia, maybe you want to talk about, who needs to be there when you're sitting down to get started as you want to implement legacy or this in your legacy system.
Yeah, so you definitely need to do your stakeholder buy-in strategy. You need to understand who those users are and the champions that are going to help you achieve success. There's a lot of homework that's involved with that. And then you need to understand how can you get people to rally around a common purpose and get them to understand the passion and energy behind the why. If we don't do this, how are we going to be at risk? How are our crown jewels going to be out there where we won't be able to protect our information? So stakeholder buy-in is key. There's several ways to conduct a strategy so that you know which are the right ones to bring in. But getting folks to see themselves in the story so that they're aligned, because everyone plays a role in this. Well, there's a lot of partnerships across all, and we need to have the SMEs. As Jerry mentioned, it takes a village, so we need to have the lawyers to understand the PII and all the different information with the identity, and the financial information is critical. We also need to understand the SMEs on the subject matter expertise area. And again, this isn't just a technology piece, it's looking through the lens of people, process, technology, and content. So understanding our data, understanding what technology, what are the apps that we need to be able to keep up with, because remember, there's so many applications out on our network, so having those client enforcers is key. And one of my main takeaways from this is learning that automation is going to be the key to success in implementing a zero trust. So we're going to have to really understand how to get that under our belt. But the stakeholders that are critical to make that happen, as mentioned by Jerry, takes a village. So it's people across all those different aspects. So you need to make sure that you have them. And it's a lot of time and energy meeting with them and getting them to buy in and understanding what's the passion and energy behind the why, and to rally around a common purpose for success and improving our ecosystem trustworthiness.
Great. Hey, Kevin or Shawn or Jerry, anything to add? No? Well, then I will say that we're pretty much out of time, but I'll give everyone, if anyone has a closing thought they might like to share before we close it out.
So I'll throw one out there that I like to throw out there, right? That and this is something that really was the strategy of zero trust is important, and I'd like to say that as we start moving into a cyber war fighting environment, I mean, we have cyber as certainly as a warfare domain in many aspects. Many people view it that way. That vulnerability of one shared by all concept, that you're only as strong as your weakest link, or defenders have to win every time, but adversaries only have to win once. I think that we have an opportunity to break that old mindset here, and I think zero trust is a great way for us to achieve that. And I just like to leave that with folks, because that can be, if you continue to listen to yourself make those sayings or repeat those phrases, it kind of hurts your ability to succeed, and it doesn't need to be that way. So thanks.
Well, Kevin, you'll get the last word, and let me again say thanks to each of you, to Kevin and to Shawn and Jerry and Cynthia. It's been a really great discussion this afternoon. There's a lot of nuances when you get into the subject and start to talk about how to do zero trust. And there's a long learning curve ahead for a lot of people, I think. So thank you for sharing your expertise, and we hope to see you back here as a guest on an INSA program sometime in the future. So thank you. And to our audience, thank you for taking time this afternoon to join us online. And of course, we very much want to thank our sponsors today, Applied Insight and Worldwide Technology. And finally, we hope that you'll be able to join us at upcoming INSA events. In the next week, we'll have on May the 12th, we'll welcome Lieutenant General Vince Stewart to our Wednesday Wisdom program. And on the 18th of May, CIA's Procurement Executive Margaret Augustine will be joining us for coffee and conversation. And on May the 19th, we will take a virtual road trip to Huntsville, Alabama, where they have an ever-growing intelligence and national security hub down there. And we'll discuss topics such as remote work and the intersection of cyber and intelligence, developing a cleared workforce, and more. And then at the end of the month, Melancy Harris will join us on May the 25th. Melancy is the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations and Combating Terrorism, and she'll join us for coffee and conversation. You can find the full lineup of these and all of our events on insaonline.org. And when today's webinar ends, you'll see a short survey pop up on your screen. Please take a minute to answer the survey questions. We value your feedback. And this concludes this afternoon's program. Stay safe and healthy, and have a wonderful afternoon. So long.